Artificial intelligence and robotics are becoming a part of our everyday lives, whether we realize it or not, whether we like it or not. Are robots and artificial intelligence ever going to gain consciousness like human beings and be able to think? And perhaps most importantly, how should we think biblically about artificial intelligence and robotics? My name is Sean McDowell. I'm a professor at Biola University, here with my co-host Scott Ray, and this is Think Biblically. Scott, I've got a ton of questions for you related to artificial intelligence and robotics, one of the most pressing issues today. So let's jump right in and maybe define our terms as we begin. So let's just ask the question, what do we mean by artificial intelligence?
Well, essentially what we mean by that, Sean, is it's computers being programmed to mimic human intelligence.
Okay.
That's essentially what it is. So
okay.
I think emphasis on the term artificial.
Okay.
Because I don't think we can make a good argument that it is identical to human intelligence and human consciousness, things like that. That's what's known as strong AI, to make it virtually indistinguishable from those.
Okay.
What's called a weak AI is I think a more realistic term, which is used to describe efforts to mimic and emulate what human intelligence, some of the things that human intelligence can do.
So the words mimic are really important. And I think if artificial intelligence had not been called artificial intelligence and just called something else, it almost would have removed a lot of the confusion that we have, wouldn't it?
I think that's right. But I think we remember that what robots and AI machines do is what they are programmed to do.
Okay.
They don't do this independently. They're not human minds that operate in a self-directed way. They do what they are programmed to do. Okay.
Well, let's talk about some examples of this, because sometimes from science fiction we just have this strong AI version of artificial intelligence that is on the horizon, but the reality is it's all around us. It's the air we breathe. So give us some examples in our daily life.
Yes, it's becoming much more common and a part of the fabric of everyday life. Take something as simple as Alexa, Siri, which mimics the mind's ability to understand human speech. Okay, that's, I think, one of the clearest examples that almost all of us use all the time. Search engines that optimize certain functions. In fact, the news feed that you get on what you look at to get your news is customized by what you click on and what you look at, and that's the use of artificial intelligence to optimize your own search functions as you go forward. Surgeons today are using robots. Now, surgeon-guided robots,
sure,
but they are in most cases they are much more efficient and much more precise than human surgeons are acting alone. So there are some forms of surgery now, like prostate surgery, for example, that are done almost exclusively robotically. So that robots run Amazon warehouses. They're all over the place.
It's amazing,
and they are the reason that Amazon is able to keep its costs down, and some would say its profits high. And there are things like AI is used to sort of mimic what therapists can do, what counselors can do. They're programmed to answer certain questions a certain way. They're programmed to respond to human beings in a certain way. So I wouldn't say there's reciprocity in the same way that there is like a human relationship, but I think sometimes, AI functioning robots can provide some of those comfort and almost therapy type of roles. So those would be some examples. It's sort of AI is founded on the idea that human intelligence can be described so precisely with our knowledge of what goes on in the brain that a machine can simulate it.
So it's really helpful to think of AI being used by surgeons that 99.9% of us will never utilize, but Alexa, even managing Uber drivers, things like Netflix that are integrated in our daily lives use artificial intelligence. Now, in some ways, your answer to the previous question kind of addressed where we're going, but I want you to talk about some of the benefits of integrating AI and robots into our daily life. And just for those watching, we start with benefits because sometimes as humans, as Christians and evangelicals, we can start with fear, and that's not always the healthy place to start, or a biblical place.
Well, yeah, and I would start theologically with general revelation and common grace, which the idea is there is that God has embedded his wisdom into his world as well as into his word, but he's embedded his wisdom into his world, and by common grace has given human beings all the capacities that they need to unlock what God's embedded into creation. So this, I think, is the way we put technology, I think, within a Christian framework. And the technology in general, I would say, is the good gift of God in order to enhance human flourishing and to improve the common good. So I think at the start, I think it's right to look at some of the benefits of what this technology can do. I think we need to treat it like we treat any other technology and look at, it's generally God's good gift, but in a fallen, broken world, it also has the possibility to go off the rails.
That's super helpful. So in some ways, a pencil is technology. A button on a shirt is technology. So we should approach artificial intelligence the way we should other technology, but clearly more is at stake with artificial intelligence than a button or a pencil. But that doesn't change the in-principle approach to look at the good use of technology. So very helpful way to frame this. Give us some examples of maybe some of the benefits of robots or AI in a daily life.
Well, I love the idea that, I don't have to look at a Thomas guide or a map.
Amen to that.
To find, especially those of us that are particularly directionally challenged.
That's me.
It would be me too. And without our wives, we'd be in really deep trouble until the AI functions that fuel our GPS systems were put to work. So that's, I think, one example. I love having the ability to search for just about anything at a couple clicks. Research today is not nearly as burdensome. When I worked on my doctoral dissertation, I spent hours and hours and hours in a literal law library photocopying things that I eventually threw away later.
So they had photocopies back then. I'm
they
sorry,
did.
I couldn't resist. Keep going.
Sometime before the flood. I think that's a really helpful thing that all of us benefit from. It's embedded in a lot of our systems that have made jobs a lot more streamlined. You don't hear today receptionists picking up the telephone.
Right.
You hear that's all done robotically.
Okay.
And then I think it has the potential, I think, to provide for some forms of sort of I would call close to human interaction.
Okay.
But not quite the same thing, but can provide close to it.
Okay.
In some important ways.
That's great. We'll get into some of those. Now, when you say we have artificial intelligence rather than a receptionist, one of the questions we'll get to not yet is, wait a minute, is this replacing jobs? We'll get there, but there's a few things we want to cover first, kind of laying the groundwork for this. So how has the social acceptance and maybe why has it shifted since the pandemic? Because some pretty significant things have changed about how people think about robots during that time.
Yeah, and I think it may be a bit different in some parts of the world than in others.
Fair enough.
For example, our colleague Meretu Gutta, who's from Ethiopia, has told us that some of the things that robots are being used for in Asia would be unthinkable in Africa, just because there is such a different emphasis on presence and proximity and community in Africa than there is in other parts of the world. So I think in the West, which is all you and I have to go on, I think we've seen an increasing comfort with this. Though there are at the edges, there's some definite unease. But I think we're sort of getting more accustomed to this, and I think what's happened is that we're actually just becoming more aware of it. because I don't think there's been a huge public relations campaign in favor of artificial intelligence. It's just been sort of gradually introduced into more and more of the fabric of our lives. I think with the lockdown that was a result of the pandemic, I think we saw a much greater need for things to be automated, things that don't require the kind of human contact that the pandemic ruled out of bounds for longer than any of us anticipated.
That's right.
So I think there's something to that that I think can be helpful. But the danger, of course, is that if it replaces some of those forms of genuine human contact and community that we all, I think, came out of the pandemic just starving for.
That's right.
So I would say it's an artificial substitute for some of those things that can provide some help along the way, but it's not a substitute for the real thing.
It's a really interesting point to say that really what it did is brought to the surface practices that were already there and made us more thoughtful about them and more aware of them. I think that's a helpful distinction to make. Now, you hinted at this in your answer in terms of how robots are incorporated into Africa versus in Asia as one example. What are some of the differences in terms of approaching robots in the East and in the West? And I ask this because one of the examples I've often used is the low birth rate in Japan is caretakers are being placed with robots. Right. My initial instinct is that's wrong, that's messed up, here's a huge problem. And there's concern there, but the more I reflect upon it, that might not be the whole picture in terms of what's going on.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. Is it the same thing as having a in-the-flesh human being take care of the elderly? I mean, is it the best thing, of course, is to have a family member do that, somebody who actually knows them. In the absence of that, we look to things like assisted living, and in parts of the world where those things aren't as readily accepted for whatever reason or readily available, I think robotics can provide the next best thing. Can it provide the same thing as a human being? Obviously not.
Sure.
But can it provide something that's good enough? It's certainly better than nothing at all. I think that's the difference. I think in the East, I think tends to be much more, people-oriented, community-oriented. I think what you described culturally going on, the birth dearth that's taken place in countries like Japan, has made some of these things a little more necessary.
Right.
But I think in the West, we tend to be a bit more task-oriented, a bit more compulsive and driven, less community-oriented in general. That's a huge, big generalization, I realize.
Sure.
But I think the ground in the West I could see being a bit more fertile for the kind of widespread acceptance of AI and robotics than in a place like the East. And certainly I think south of the equator, you'd find a much different attitude toward replacing human beings with robots.
I think one of the key points is that can robots help in a way that is better than not having robots as long as they're not replacing human beings or pretending to be human in a way that is deceptive.
Right, that's misleading.
That's where the ethical line starts to cross. But even in things like counseling, it's interesting how some people who have trauma or difficulty can initially open up to a robot in a way they might not to a human being.
That's right.
Now, as long as that is a gateway to get the person to opening up to a human being, that seems to me to be a positive step in the right direction.
No, that's a really good example. And if that, because people suffering from PTSD, often the most difficult step is getting the process started. And so if we can help get that, sort of get them off the dime and get the process moving, then it has real potential for significant healing. But that's, anytime you have those kind of really hard emotional conversations with another human being, there's just a difference there.
Absolutely.
And I'm not exactly sure how to wrap my arms around exactly what that means for a trauma patient. But there's a difference opening up to a person. I suspect one of those things is that with a real person, you have the possibility of being judged and evaluated when you don't with a robot, unless they're programmed to be judgmental, which I'm sure could be certainly a possibility.
Which isn't real judgment then.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct. It would be artificial judgment.
There you go. So it lacks the judgment, but also lacks the ability to really love. Correct. So if it can open up a door to somebody being loved, and if there's some appropriate judgment that needs to be made through that person's life, a human being can make that. That's true for all of us as we grow. So
let's just say I think what people don't fear in opening up to a robot powered by artificial intelligence would be being put to shame. And I think that may be the biggest hurdle that keeps someone from opening up and really getting the healing process started.
In some ways, it's like video games. They sometimes, now this raises other ethical issues, but obviously sometimes in war, video games will be used to break down somebody's barriers to using a weapon. If that's a step to self-defense and a righteous use, and I realize there's debate about that, that in principle could be a positive use of technology. So we've talked about a lot of potential positive uses, but I know you have some concern. Talk about some of your concerns.
Well, and I know you've thought a lot about some of these concerns too. I think my biggest concern is that there's the economic disruption that it is causing and will cause in the future. I don't believe that robots are going to take all of the jobs of human beings.
Okay.
But I do believe they're going to take some of them. And it's going to cause disruption in job markets and displacement of workers and people who have actually done everything they're supposed to do. They've gone to school, they've gotten their education, they've gotten trained to do a good job. They've done it well. Find that they're being replaced. I don't think we're anything close to prepared for this economic disruption that I think is coming over the next few years with this. So that's one thing that I think is very worrying to me.
Okay.
Because we're going to have a lot of people who are going to have to figure out, well, what do I do with my life now that my livelihood has been taken by a robot?
And might examples of this be like truck drivers? That's a massive profession that a lot of people benefit from and have served for years. But it seems like artificial intelligence is potentially taking over the shipping of certain goods. I don't know how large that industry is, but that would be a lot of people potentially out of jobs.
And if take for one thing we didn't mention in the examples that are coming, or are already here and are coming in more detail, but are self-driving cars, which will put Uber, Lyft, taxi drivers, delivery people, potentially all. Not to mention, and if we have self-driving cars, there's no reason we can't have self-driving trucks as well. So that has just that by itself hugely disruptive. So there are lots of people that have very, very well-paying jobs, driving trucks all over the country, that may be looking for other things to do.
So when we talk about artificial intelligence, there's a lot of angles we could go with concerns. You've mentioned one that's an economic potential concern. Before we get to the question, I know a lot of people are asking, and this is a lot of your specialty, is will intelligent agents, in sense of robots, ever be able to think like human beings? Are there any other concerns that you have, societally speaking?
Yeah, here's the way I would put it. I'd use the term, what some people call encrypted discrimination. That, for example, lots of job applications are not reviewed first and foremost by human beings. They're viewed by machines.
Okay.
And machines, with artificial intelligence powering them, can be programmed to look for and sort out any qualifications that companies want or don't want. and it would not be difficult to encrypt into the assessment of resumes factors that I think we would pretty easily suggest are discriminatory.
Gotcha.
So that's one thing where it could go off the rails, and in ways that my guess is most people are never going to be aware of. If you're not the one programming it, how will you know if that's ever been an issue? So that's one thing that I think that troubles me. And I think the other thing that I think worries me is if what we call strong AI becomes more and more what people are after. I think we could make a metaphysical mistake in assuming that a machine can do all of the same things literally that a human mind can do. That it can make decisions, it can engage, it can have consciousness, it can engage in moral reasoning. Those require, I think, more of a broader philosophical understanding of what a human person is and what characterizes a person as opposed to what can be programmed into a machine.
Gotcha. Now, let me come back to that and see if you think that's going to happen or not. But I think the reality is artificial intelligence is raising questions we've never had to really ask before. So I've seen coming through in social media this app that says it creates content for you. Now I'm reading that going, wait a minute. If I put my name on that, maybe it's a system that pulls from other things I've written and says, this is the kind of thing you would say. Do I put my name on that? Do I not? Am I the author? Even just asking those questions stretches the bound of what authorship means and responsibility to content with your name on it.
Not to mention copyright.
And copyright too. These are just new questions. And that's just one. Artificial intelligence raises a lot of new questions. And what we're tempted to do is just to use it for efficiency and to skip over asking the more difficult questions. Overall, that's one of my biggest concerns.
I think that's a huge and well-founded concern because we've already seen it taking place. Think about how much this has become a part of the fabric of life without anybody really asking a lot of serious questions about whether we want this to be a part of the fabric of our lives. You know, I'm very troubled by some of the algorithms that are used to direct self-driving cars. You know, for example, if an accident is imminent and you are about to collide with a car with 3 people in it, and you're by yourself, that self-driving car is programmed to save more lives rather than less.
Okay.
And namely, you're in serious trouble if that's the case.
Okay.
So I think how these things are programmed obviously has ethical values and principles embedded in them that nobody's disclosing. So I mean, that's one example with a self-driving car that hopefully not going to happen very often.
Right.
But if they become much more prevalent, you know, you're gonna see more types of things like that happening.
Now I can imagine someone watching this going, that seems pretty common sense, that if it's going to crash, save more lives than not. Your point is that's not the only metric, and it just highlights that certain ethical ideas are built into this and have to be. They're not human decisions. Now it's a machine. And we have to be aware of how those are built into them, and some can have troubling conclusions.
Right. And I think we need to be clear. It's not the machine's not making the decision. A team of human beings has programmed the machine to make, to quote, make that decision. But I think we should be very clear that artificial intelligent robots are not decision-making agents like human beings are.
Okay, so they're not right now. Will they ever be?
Well, for one, that presumes that they would have human consciousness. And we know so little about the origin of our own human consciousness. How is it that we have this ability to look at ourselves through first-person introspection, which I think is good evidence that we actually are conscious of ourselves, sort of independently of our bodies. How is it that we can't even figure out where this comes from in human beings, much less to be able to program it into some sort of artificially intelligent machine? So I'm not optimistic that strong AI is ever going to be possible. Now, we may come closer to the more we learn about neuroscience and the brain, the more we understand the neurological functions, the better we'll be able to mimic them.
Okay.
But that's in my view, metaphysically, that's a huge leap from humans programming something like consciousness to actually having it.
Gotcha.
That's a really big leap, and I think the same is true for things like moral reasoning, rationality. It mimics rationality. That's the point. It emulates it.
Okay.
But it only does what it's programmed to do.
I think one of the key points you're making is how at core worldview issues underlie this question. So if naturalism is true and we're just complex physical machines, then in principle, self-consciousness or robots is possible. But if we are body and soul, which you have argued, then just mimicking the brain isn't going to get us all the way there because there's also a soul. Now, we're not going to settle that issue right now,
right,
but really want to highlight the worldview issues at play.
But I think you've made the right point, because almost everybody in the AI scientific and programming community believes exactly what you said about a human being. Mm-hmm. It is a physical thing only. And this is where you're absolutely right. The worldview means everything. Because if physicalism about a human being is true, if we are nothing more than a collection of our parts and properties, then there's no reason why strong AI can't be true.
So if human beings make an AI system that's self-conscious, what's often missed is this wouldn't mirror how it allegedly happened in nature through an evolutionary process, which is unguided and purposeless. If it happens, and again, even to say I'm skeptical understates where I stand. I don't think it's metaphysically possible, but if it did happen, it would be an argument for design because it takes intelligence to get there. That's an interesting point that's left out. Now, with that said, let me shift it a little bit. I want to ask you a question that just, in some ways, I don't know where to go with this. The fact that we have to ask this question today is just eye-opening to where our culture is at. But we've seen this in movies. Can human beings even be friends with AI robots? Can we be a friend with a robot? And we've seen in movies like Her with Joaquin Phoenix, not just a friend, but a boyfriend and a girlfriend. Is such a thing possible?
Well, it depends on how you're defining the term friend.
Fair enough.
If you mean by that a reciprocal relationship, I think the answer to that is no. Because what you are doing is you are interacting with a machine that's been programmed in a certain way to respond to you in a certain way. None of that is spontaneous. None of that is intuitive like we have in a real relationship. So there's a whole lot that's missing from what we would generally take to be the normal reciprocal give and take of a relationship that we take is actually pretty commonplace. Now, it can mimic some of that. It can mimic sympathy, for example, when you share, negative emotions, for example. It can mimic compassion. Can it give you the same thing can it give you the reciprocity that you get from another human being? I think the answer to that is no, and I don't see where that will ever be the case, because ultimately we talk about relationships in terms of soulmates for a reason. And it's because there's a soulish connection that's made. I mean, whether a person acknowledges it or not. I mean, even physicalists are looking for their soulmate. And what they mean by that is that there's something deeper that they want to connect with that's not reducible to physics and chemistry in a person. Now, I know you've had thoughts about this too.
Yeah, the idea of reciprocity is where I hit a wall with being friends with a robot. Can someone come to care about a robot? Sure. Can someone benefit from that? Yes. But is that a friendship? I mean, even in fiction, movies like Big Hero 6 entertain this idea of a robot. But at the end, sorry to ruin it, people have had plenty of time to see it, but the robot kind of sacrificing its life has meaning, not just because it was programmed to, but seems to make that choice to do so.
Independently.
Which is something, and that a robot can't really do. So if we stretch what a robot is and make it self-conscious, then it seems we could have that kind of friendship. But robots can't and won't be able to do that. So the idea of friendship, to me, now today I think maybe it has some legs, so to speak, with people, because the idea of friends on social media has been really diluted. I mean, I call somebody a friend that I've responded to in a tweet back and forth. So maybe that's why this idea has been—
800 of my closest friends.
Yeah, exactly. So I understand why people might find that appealing, but I think we have to remember there's something fundamentally different about a robot that is going to not allow the kind of friendship Scripture talks about.
Maybe I'd put it like this.
Okay.
The real friendships are organic and natural and self-initiating, not programmed. And I think that's another way to look at this idea of reciprocity. Because if a machine is not a moral agent, then it's hard to see how you can have a genuine friendship.
That makes sense. So we've talked about with robots that they don't have creativity similar to human beings. It's downstream from the creativity built into them. We've also talked about how robots don't have moral reasoning, but they're built in a certain way to react in certain circumstances because of the moral reasoning of the programmers.
I'd put it like this: they have an algorithm that's driven by unstated, unexpressed moral values.
Okay, good.
That operate by.
Built into them by human beings who have creativity and moral reasoning.
Which, interestingly, sort of begs the question of where did that creativity and rationality and moral sense come from in the programmers themselves in the first place? Which on a, as you've pointed out numerous times, on a naturalistic, physicalist worldview, there's just no adequate way to account for that.
That's exactly right.
That's the elephant in the living room in this larger conversation.
That's a great question. Let's jump to what's been called the robot rights movement. When I first heard this, I was like, robot rights movement? Again, what are we talking about? What's happening? Now, my first instinct is like, of course robots don't have rights. They're not human beings. But that's not necessarily what's meant by robot rights. It's more the sense of, do we attribute rights to robots because of the function and role they may play in society for society to function better? So it's not for the sake of the robot itself, but more the role that it plays. Is that fair? And what are your thoughts on robot rights?
I think that is a fair description. And I would suggest that if the fundamental right is the right to life, which robots don't have, all other rights are built on that. So in that case, if we recognized a right for a robot, it would be because it has instrumental value, not intrinsic. That is, it has value to accomplish something else that's not intrinsic to the robot itself. So I could see, for example, if you have, say, a robot that is actually walking someone across a busy street, for example, the robot would have the right not to be run over by a car in the street.
Okay.
It would have the right.
The right, in the sense of the legal right. Yeah.
It would basically have, maybe it would have the right of way.
Okay.
Would be a better way to put it.
Okay, that's good.
So that would be one example. I think robots would have, if they're performing valuable functions, I wouldn't call that a right. I'd call that just something that's wise to do. They would have. It would be in everybody's interest to have them properly maintained. If they needed repair, to provide those, but not because the robot has a right to that. I mean, I suspect none of us would think twice that when a robot outlived its usefulness, stripping it for parts and throwing the rest on a scrap heap, which we would not do with human beings.
And this is where we make a distinction between a legal right and a moral right. So legal rights should reflect moral rights, but this is not always the case.
Not always.
Whether it's in abortion laws, human beings have the right to life. The unborn is a human being. Sadly, our laws don't reflect that. We see a similar thing. In Nazi Germany, the right to life was denied to human beings. So they don't always match up. When we're talking about human beings, we have a moral right not to get run over, and we have the legal right. A robot doesn't have the moral right. It has the legal right. In fact, if you damage the robot, you're not harming the robot itself as a human being. If anything, you're harming the person who made it and the person who ordered the service of food delivery. Right. That distinction, I think, is really important when we talk about robot rights.
I'm just thinking out loud here on this one. Because, watch out. But I'm wondering if there's a parallel to the way we think about animal rights. The reason we have laws that protect animals from cruelty, in my view, is not because animals have rights, but it's because of what cruelty to animals says about human beings. It's a virtue-based approach to that. And I think it's that sort of reflects, I think, what you just suggested, that we would recognize something for robots, but it's not intrinsic to the robot. It's because it has, that not providing that would involve harm or benefit to another human being or a community. And so to look at it in terms of that virtue approach is, what does that say about us as a community if we would, have a sort of fast and loose view toward how we treat robots, because we don't want to be seen as uncaring or uncompassionate toward the people whom the robots are serving. So something like that. I don't know. So, I have to think a little harder about that one, but
that's fair. But I think you could also argue that how we treat a robot is going to shape us. And this is true with animals.
That's right.
If you're cruel to animals, the issue you raised is behind it, but it also affects us. Maybe the way we'll treat human beings, maybe the way we'll treat creation. The same with robots is maybe we want robot rights because the more they seem to be human, if we mistreat them, it can dehumanize others in our minds and create a culture that is less loving and caring. I think for that reason almost alone, because we do sometimes confuse. I mean, I found myself sometimes I get mad at Siri and I'm like, what am I doing? It's like pulling out something in me. I'm like, this is just a program. It's just doing what it's trained to do. And it's like pulling something out of me. Well, for that reason, there maybe should be a kind of qualified robot rights as there's animal rights. So we in turn treat one another more humanely.
I didn't know that you yelled at Siri.
I've caught myself doing that a time or two. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, just what's the point?
Well, you've had some pastoral experience too. Because I know the question comes up sometimes. What about using robotics and AI in the ministry of the local church? If it's good for therapists, why wouldn't it also be good for something like pastoral counseling? I know you've thought about that a bit.
I have, and I don't have it all figured out. For some reason, when it comes to ministry, I become that much more cautious with all the issues that we've raised because Christianity is such an embodied presence, kind of a religion, so to speak. Our job is to love God and to love others. So I'm less concerned with pastors being out of a job, although I don't want pastors out of a job, is I'm asking the question, are we ministering to people in a humane way? So my bottom line principle is if robots can better support humans ministering to humans, save time, save money, be more efficient, I don't in principle have a problem with that. But the moment it replaces human to human interaction or confuses a robot with a human being, then I'm out. So that's the in principle barrier I would trace. But if somebody, even simpler artificial intelligence is used all the time by pastors today.
Right.
We just have to be cautious. We're never dehumanizing somebody. And they're just a system of efficiency that replaces ministry, then we've gone too far.
Yeah, and I think that would hold for therapists, counselors, any type of sort of human-to-human contact that we find irreplaceable. But I think it can help. It can help support that. It can help get those started and move us along the way. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to replacing it, I think you're absolutely right that then we've reached a danger zone that we ought to retreat back from.
And we also got to think through. I think of robots like there's been stories of serving, the sacraments or potentially seating people. Part of me is like, that's fine. But we also got to remember there's roles within the body of Christ that humans are meant to do. Is it encroaching on that? Those are the questions, again, we have to ask before we rush into technology that just saves us time or seems cool. With that, go ahead.
I want to speculate.
Okay.
For a minute.
All right.
And ask you to do the same.
Okay.
Where do you see this going in the future?
Boy,
open your crystal ball there for a minute. And
I got to tell you, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a prophet. Obviously, we work at a nonprofit organization, to steal Barry Corey's line that he used. I don't even know how to answer that. But I think the bottom line is it's going to become more and more integrated into our daily life. Probably going to increase like a hockey stick in some ways. We're just seeing the beginning of this, and some of this has been brought on by the pandemic. So I think it's going to increase, it's going to grow. We're seeing somewhat of an arms race across countries to get artificial intelligence that affects the way we even approach war. So I think there will not be, the fact that we are having the question about how it affects church ministry is kind of downstream from this. This tells us that everything we do in life in some fashion is going to be touched by artificial intelligence. That's where it's headed, if it's not already there.
I think that's really insightful. It's hard to be prophetic about this because 10 years ago, who saw any of this coming other than the people who are actually in the industry? I think the average person didn't see any of this on the horizon and still may not see much of it. What's penetrated the fabric of their lives, they just see it as just part of what technology provides.
Well said. Bottom line is we can't be afraid of these questions, but need to invite them and consistently go back to Scripture and think biblically about them. Thanks for joining us today. This conversation was brought to you by the Think Biblically podcast. Go subscribe. That's an audio podcast, and yet sometimes we get to do this by video as well. Scott, great discussion on artificial
Sean,
intelligence.
lots of good questions,
robotics.
lots of good interaction, lots of fun.
We'll see you next time.